I am a software engineer. I'm also a Google Women Techmakers Ambassador, and I am one of the organizers of Droidettes. So today we will be talking about essential principles for integrating mobile app features with backend systems. And as you've seen, I do have experience when it comes to Android engineering, but as I've worked in mobile app development, like I've worked in Mentorlst, I've come to see that it's very important for mobile engineers to also just understand, not in depth, but just a surface level of how the backend works, how UI UX works. Basically, can you guys still see my screen? Because I don't think you can see my screen. Oh, okay. Yeah, so basically how UI UX work, just an overview, like surface level, so that it's easier for us as we go on with developing. So just a disclaimer, one of my great principles is that you learn quickest when teaching or when sharing information. So this is going to just be an open session. Feel free, maybe if you see that I've not covered on something, feel free to leave a comment or to ask a question or to maybe add to something that I've already shared. And then also there will be quite a number of technical terms that I'm going to use and quite a number of tools that I'm going to mention. So please let this not scare you away. I'd just like you to, the reason why I'm mentioning all these things is so that you can also do research as well, get to learn a few things. And also, even in later sessions, you'll notice that I'll be mentioning the things that I talk about in this talk. So yeah, we're going to have like a sort of a series, but it won't have a flow. It will just be random. So yeah, it'll be like a random series. So touch on backend development a bit. We're also going to talk about mostly just about mobile app development. That's the main part of this whole thing. And I hope you guys will get to learn. All right. So let us get to it. So the key components of mobile app backend development. I mean, as a backend developer, when you're developing for a mobile application specifically, the first thing that you need to know is that building for a website is totally different from building for a mobile application. They're totally different, especially when you're doing Android. When you're building for Android, it's very, very different. So that's one of the things that you have to put in mind. So you need to think about the APIs that you're going to use, basically the application programming interfaces, which enable communication between the mobile application and the backend. And the second thing you need to consider is your server infrastructure. If you choose to use Azure, if you choose to use AWS, if you choose to use Google Cloud, make sure that you are going to be consistent with it so that you don't get to the point where you are telling the mobile developer that uh, there's a migration that has to happen. Like we have to change probably the server that we've been using, and so that causes things like delays, right? It's also important for you to know the database that you're going to use, where you're going to store and manage your data, because security of client information is very, very important. You need to think about user management. This is in terms of authentication and authorization. Um, just make sure that you know how you're going to authenticate, whether you're going to use JWT, which is the JSON Web Tokens, if you're going to use OAuth, or if you choose to use Firebase or Superbase, whatever you choose to use, just make sure you are fully aware that it's something that you can use in, like, it's good for scaling, good for performance, has great security, things like that you have to consider. Also, there's the aspect of push notifications. because as you know, mobile applications have notifications. So this is just, it's important because of sending real-time updates to the user. You can use things like Firebase Cloud messaging, but it just depends on, it literally just depends on what you want to use. So to achieve the best and seamless integration, so now we're done with, just talking about an overview of the backend. Now we're in talking about the integration part. So basically, to achieve the best and most seamless integration, you need to make sure that, of course, you have your API and you have clear documentation. You need to think about how you're going to authenticate and authorize your app. You need to think about scalability and performance. You need to think about security. You need to think about things like error handling and logging. You need to think about versioning and compatibility. So in this case, I won't really touch on versioning and compatibility, but basically what it's about is that it ensures the changes that are made in the backend do not affect whatever was already there in your mobile application. And then, of course, there's the aspect of testing, which is very, very important. So as we talked about previously, the first thing we talked about is the API, right? So that's the first thing that we're also going to talk about now, which is very, very key. APIs basically handle communication between the app and the backend. So this is important not just for backend engineers, but also for mobile app engineers. I thought it would be good for me to share, something that was done by Postman, a documentation that they give, very, very detailed. I mean, I know that developers sometimes struggle with documentation, but this is so important. As you can see in the documentation here, they're talking about the simple book API. They talk about if it's a GET request, sorry, for this specific endpoint, it's a GET request, it returns the status of the API. You see, it gives a clear explanation of the type of endpoint, the type of request, and what it does. You see, and even with the other endpoints, it gives the queries and the limits that are there. And for those that require authentication, you'll notice that it's written here, allows you to submit a new order, and it requires authentication. So, I mean, this is the type of clear and crisp kind of documentation that would be required for a mobile developer to actually understand what the specific endpoints actually do. And I just thought it would be nice for me to maybe just show you that specific like the specific API. So I got to work with it. I'm not going to go into details about Postman because that's not basically what it's about, what this tutorial is about. But as you can see, I put in the base URL, I put my endpoint there. And what I expect, because they told me, right, when we were looking at the status right here, they say that it returns the status of the API. So what I expect as a mobile developer is to see a status down here. And as you can see, when I sent my request, we can actually do it again. Let's see, yeah, it still brings the status okay, and it's a status of 200, right? As you know, 200 is usually the successful one, right? And then for those which are authenticated, I think it gives clear information on how, how the authentication is supposed to work. It says that, the request body needs to be in JSON format. And then it says, this is how, this is an example, very clear documentation that will help to have, very seamless. I'll just put here my body. Where is it? Yeah. See, I put here my body, Rach, and then just any random client email. And as you can see, it brought me a status of 200. the access token. And this access token is used for the specific things that require authentication for you to access, right? And guys, some important whatever food, you'll see that it has ingredients, correct? It shows you like how to even make it, the nutritional information. So that's basically what headers are. It's just helping you to try to understand the characteristic of the client and the characteristic of the API. And as we can see here, the headers that are there are like the authorization, we have content type, we have the user agent, which is very important when it comes to backend development. It's important for you to know that for a user agent, if you're building for an Android application, it's important for you to set your user agent as Android, because if you have it as web, then even when Android tries to send a request, the API does not recognize it. So yeah, headers are quite important. I think that's it on Postman. The tutorials online, if you'd like to get some of the links, I can definitely share with you. So after you've done the documentation, it's good. As a mobile developer, you've also read the documentation, you've understood it, you've tested your API in Postman or whichever other client you want to test it. Now we can talk about the actual client. As I told you, I'm very conversant with Android, so I will talk about Android, but um sorry, but we'll see how we can navigate to the others. Yes, so when it comes to Android and also the aspect of Flutter, or if you're doing React Native, you all need a HTTP client, right? So for Android, we usually use Ktor client as a library, or we choose to use Retrofit. With Flutter, they also have quite a number of libraries, but people usually use HTTP package. And for React Native, there's Axios. They were quite a number. So you choose the one that you're most comfortable with. And then I think I also talked about the aspect of headers. When it comes to the content type application, JSON is like something that's used a lot. There's also different headers. There's the user agent that you're going to use, is the token, the bearer token, rather authorization headers. Yes, there's that. And then in Android, we do have the data transfer objects. It's basically the same throughout, whether you're doing web or you're doing Flutter or React Native. I'll get to show you what we actually mean, because it's just the same thing. Also, there's the aspect of you declaring your base URL with the endpoints. I think we saw that in Postman. And there's the aspect of caching, which is very important when it comes to performance and scalability, which we will also talk about as we go on. Now, I think I've talked about headers a lot, so I will not spend time on this screen, but I will talk about the data transfer objects that I told you about. So basically, this is the JSON representation that you will see in the backend, right? Or in the API documentation, if I may say. So when it comes to Kotlin, we use Kotlin serialization, because you see, Kotlin does not understand the JSON language. So we have to like translate it from JSON to Kotlin. I know that, Flutter, React Native, it could be different, but basically, when you have your JSON representation, you have to make sure that this is actually declared inside your client, right? So for us, we call it the data transfer. because it helps you to understand the best data structure to use that will help your system to perform in the best way possible, right? Um, so when you're building for scalability and performance, one of the most important things to do is collaboration between the backend developer and the mobile developer. Make sure that you both understand what is the best thing for you to use, so that the integration does not have an issue in future, right? So when the project is in its baby steps, then it's very, very important for you to make the very best of decisions. There's also the aspect of continuously refining and optimization. So for this, you have to continuously ensure that you look at how best you can improve your system. And I usually give an example of one of the situations that we had. An app was being built, and then when it was being built, it was actually for registering users, right? So, according to them, they were like, the maximum number of users we can have is like 200 being registered, right? So let's make this specific screen to only be one screen, and, it can support maybe a maximum. I don't think it can be so big. When the app was released, the registrations went up to like 4,000 users. And you see, the app was not really built for scaling. So the app it literally crashed. Yeah. So in that case, they had to introduce pagination so that each page can now hold the 200 users that they had, um, thought of initially. So it's very, very important for you to continuously refine and optimize your code to make sure that it is as scalable as possible. Monitor performance, such as response times, error rates, resource utilization, which page the user is using, which page the user is not using. Employee caching, I think I talked about this earlier when we were talking about shared preferences and data store. Shared preferences is also in Flutter. So for Android, we recently just started using data store. So it helps to reduce latency and to improve the response rate. So caching is very, very important. Instead of you continuously all the time fetching from the API, storing these things locally really helps a lot. There's the aspect also of decoupling components. In Android, we use Kotlin coroutine for asynchronous functions. I know that in Flutter there is async await, and actually in all, whether you're doing web, whether you're doing React Native, whatever you're doing, asynchronous functions is such a key thing because it really, really helps to improve the performance. And there's also the aspect of using tools like R8, which optimizes the code, removes anything that is unnecessary within the code, so that we don't have the app running with things that we didn't really need. Okay, there's also the aspect of security. Um, so in terms of security, there's the aspect of encryption. We know that security is very important, even for you. You don't want to be using an application that has hackers or or any of that stuff. So encryption is very important. So for user secrets, and also to secure your storage, for secure storage APIs, use APIs like Keychain for iOS and Keystore for on Android. These are some of the things we'll be talking about in later stages. We also reduce access control to the backend, and keep all app secrets in the backend. I mean, keep those secrets in the backend as much as possible, because you see, the app is the one that is being exposed um, to Play Store, right? So people do have access to it. People can decide to reverse engineer, which I go to my next point. You obfuscate your app to prevent reverse engineering by using tools like R8 and ProGuard before you release your app. So these two things, R8 or ProGuard, what it does is that it it encrypts your code, so that even though people can download your application, even if they do reverse engineer it, they're not going to understand what exactly was going on. This one is probably more of a cybersec kind of thing. Regular security audits. So this is things like conducting penetration testing and vulnerability assessments, to identify things that, could make the system quite weak. Yes. So far we have talked about the APIs, we've talked about scalability and performance, we've talked about security, and now we're going to talk about authentication and authorization. And actually, I want to, throw a question to you guys right now. What is the difference between authentication and authorization? Anyone who would like to? Yes, Sandra. Oh, Glenn. Okay. Okay, both of you will take that. Okay, Glenn, you'll also speak. Uh-huh. Yes, Sandra?
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Authentication is who the user is, and authorization is what the user can do.
Okay, okay. I like how simple you've made it. Authentication is who the user is, and authorization is what the user can do. All right, Glenn. Glenn, are you still in the call? Glenn or Cheng, I'd love to hear your definition of it.
It was just the same.
Okay. All right. All right. So yeah, as Sandra has said, authentication is basically verifying the identity of the user or the device. So it allows legitimate users to access your application, right? And we have different ways of authenticating. We do have the password-based authentication. We have the OAuth 2.0, using Google Cloud and stuff. Or like if you want to authenticate Facebook, like sign in with Facebook, LinkedIn, such stuff. We do have multi-factor authentication, and where we use the authenticators. I think you guys know about that as well. There's also the biometric authentication. You can use your Face ID, fingerprints, etc. Now, I know that backend developers really understand what goes on in depth here, but there's just a very, very specific point that I wanted to put out there, specifically for Android developers who are working with a backend system that is not Supabase or Firebase for their authentication, right? There is a specific issue on verification. So basically, verification uses deep links. And for Android 11 devices and below, the deep links work quite well when you want to verify your app. For example, if I am a user, I register, right? I give my details, and then you send me an email to tell me to verify my email. So when I click on that link, it sends me back to the mobile application. I think you guys have experienced that. So if you're using Android 11 and below, like Android 10, Android 9, you'll be fine. But if you're using Android 12 and above, and you have just set the deep links uh, as it was being done previously, and then you're going to have a problem with your system. So an important thing for you to do as a backend developer, or rather as a mobile developer, is to speak to the backend guys and tell them to set up the Google Digital Asset Links, which is just a JSON file that contains the SHA-256 and the package name of your mobile application, so that you can be able to, sorry, so that you can be able to basically verify your account. Um, Also on this, I'd like to talk about this SHA-1, the SHA-1 key, which is basically used in Google Cloud for those who use Google authentication. Let me just see if I have, yes. Oh yeah, so if you're using Google Cloud, as you can see, I created one for the Android client and another one for the web client. You see that two totally different. Okay, there's a way that it's all created here in credentials. I don't want to go deep into that, but I just wanted to put it out there that it's very, very important for us to understand that for web, it's different from Android applications or Flutter, totally different. And um it's because like each has to have its own client ID, so you cannot use the client ID of a web application in your Android or your Flutter application. It has to be created separately. I'm not sure about React Native, but I'm sure the React Native guys will give me feedback on that. Yeah, so when it comes to authentication, important tools to use are like JWT. I think we've talked about that. You can choose to also use Keycloak. You can choose to use Firebase. You can choose to use Superbase. I mean, it really just depends on how big your system is and what you want to use it for. Um, as we already talked about authorization, it's just the process of determining what an authenticated user is allowed to do. So this one is just based on, what the user roles. So you can be an admin and then you can be a normal user. And yeah, you'll see totally different pages depending on who you are. Now, another important thing is testing. Testing is so important. I know that personally, I'm not really a fan of testing, but testing will will take you further. So make sure you write your tests. Make sure you have integration tests. Integration tests are basically the tests that you write for the integration process. So basically, when the whatever you used, the Ktor client, the HTTP package, whatever you used to connect to your backend, write tests for it. When you add that endpoint, you add the function for the endpoint, write an integration test. Also, instrumentation tests are very good because sometimes the problem is not in the integration. Sometimes the problem is somewhere in how you've set up your UI. So these tests will really help you to understand. And then finally, a very important thing when it comes to integration is E2E testing. So basically end-to-end testing, which basically is testing your entire app flow from start to finish. Um, some of the things that you test is like the functional testing, where you verify each of the features. Um, there's the performance testing. It just checks how responsive your app is, scalable, the scalability as well. There's the usability testing. Sometimes you create something for a user and you think that, hey, this one they're going to really love. I think one of the things that I saw, and no offense to X, like the former Twitter, but who uses Grok AI? I mean, okay, personally, I've never used it, but if you have, I mean, must be nice. But you create something really cool for a user, and they are really not interested. So, usability testing is also very important, just to see how the user is actually going to interact with your mobile application. So at the end of the day, when you're building, who is the most important person? It is the user. You can create something amazing, but the user is the most important. So for seamless integration, um, the impact on the user, and if you want to have like really great retention in your mobile apps, it is achieved by continuous improved performance. You get to have enhanced features for the user, real-time updates, personalization, scalability, data security. Basically, having a backend system is actually really important, and it does help with all this when you have your backend integration working quite well. So, with all that said, the reason why I really did put this is because it's important for us to upskill. As I talked about data structures and algorithms, it's good not just for looking for that big tech job, but also just understanding what is best to use for your system. Also, just having a system design, basically knowing the architecture of the entire system, all the way from the back end to your mobile application. Um, in this whole time, I think I've talked a lot about working in teams. So building a project with a team, open source projects. Like I think right now there's a Flutter project for Fluttercoin. There's also the Droidcoin project for Droidcoin as well. There's an aspect you really need to understand network calls, testing and debugging, and then there's also the aspect of soft skills, which is basically how you communicate within the team. Yes. So with that said, I know that now you get to understand that this specific talk was for someone who is intending to build for an actual system and working in an organization with a team. So this is very, very important. I know that many of us build personal projects, but I think even with the new rules from Google Play Store, that if your app does not really have functionality, then it will be removed. I think this is an opportunity for guys to, try to work together. I think it's very, very important. Work on open source projects and just help you to upskill so that you can get to understand what happens in UI UX, what happens in backend. Not that you want to get deep into it, but that surface level understanding really makes a difference when you're building your applications. So yeah, this is my Mentorlst QR code. You can always connect with me, and as you are connecting with me, I'd like to open the floor for questions. Yes. Any questions? Okay, any questions? Okay, any comments? Okay, Glenn.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Okay. So first, like to thank you for the session. Yeah. And I also I have a question
Mm-hmm.
on yeah. You've been mentioning the Kato library.
Mm-hmm.
So and since you work as an Android engineer, so
Yeah.
is used more than retrofitting native Android projects because
Mm-hmm.
according to what I know is
Mm-hmm.
that Kato is mostly used for Kotlin multi-platform projects. So just asking about that.
Okay, so it depends on what you want to do. You see, it's really good, as you've already mentioned, right? Ktor is used for Kotlin multi-platform. And it is safer to use it because eventually you never know, maybe in future if you do decide to use Kotlin multi-platform. But if your organization or you yourself are comfortable with using retrofit, it's absolutely fine. But for me, what advice I would give is that it's very important for you to grow, otherwise you will be left behind. So just get to know about it. I mean, just know. I just do a fancy project, or even if not, you can even go to the Droidcoin um open source project, because it uses Gator, and just understand how it works, because it's pretty easy. It's just a few lines of code. So Ktor is used a lot these days, more than retrofit, but that's not to say that retrofit is not being used. Retrofit is being used. It's by quite a number of people, but a lot of people are migrating to Ktor Yeah.
It's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Fred, an informative question. An informative session. I have a question. If you are building an Android app, does it have a backend and front end? And is the backend usually a web app? Or Android apps also have their own backends and databases? Maybe just describe for me how Android apps are built. I am a newbie. um, okay. We don't really say that we have a front end or a back end, because I usually feel like Android apps are a back end and front end. Like it's the whole thing. Um so basically we have the UI side, and then we have the integration side. Let me say that. That's the best way to describe it. So we have the UI, which is like our front end, and then we have our integration. It's not a back end, it's just a connection between the back end and the UI. Um, yeah. So basically that's how it is. I think that's front end also has like the integration part as well, because how would it work anyway? Yeah. And you'll come to notice also that it's very easy for an Android developer or even a Flutter developer to use Superbase or Firebase, which makes work so much easier instead of just building your own backend. So like we have that scapegoat. Um, it may not be as scalable, but for someone who wants to start, it's a good place to start. But not to say that you should ignore the whole backend integration process, because when you start working in teams and for big organizations which have their own backend, then you're going to have a very big issue if you do not understand the whole integration process. Yeah. I don't know if I've explained it to you well. Yes, Eliud. Oh, hi, Eliud.
Hey Rachel, how are you?
I'm fine. Such a
Yeah,
long time.
yeah, long time.
Anyway, but we will talk.
Okay, okay. So I had a question. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you've logged in as a user
Okay.
and you are given a JWT token, right?
Yeah.
Now, how do you store that one? First, how do you store that one? Also, like when sending the request to the to endpoints that are not permitted and require the JWT token. How do you pass that one?
Uh-huh.
Also, like
Mm-hmm.
how do you send the app to know, like, I am an admin, so these are the screens that will be shown. I am a regular user, these are the screens that will be shown.
Okay. So I think you're talking about, first of all, the authentication part. You use data store. Like data store is your local helper, if I may say so. Um, and it is saved for that specific session. And then when you log out, the access token is basically deleted, right? So when you log in, the access token is fetched, you save it in the data store. When you log out, it's deleted. Um, you've also talked about, sorry, you've talked about authorization. So when it comes to authorization, that's all basically in the backend, because, for example, if you're for the mailing app, right? If you're registered as a member, you see really different from a mentee, right? The screens are totally different. So it's because they have two different profile IDs. Is for mentees, okay? And even when you're creating your screens, the screens are different, but they're shared screens. I don't know if I can like you do have your folder for shared screens, right? But there's for a mentor and there's for a mentee, right? They have totally different profile IDs. Someone made a comment. Dennis was like, "What's not scalable about Superbase or Firebase?" Well, you have a valid point. You have a valid point. But what if Superbase or Firebase decide to close down? Look, I don't know. I don't know. Like web apps usually have separate stacks for backend. Does Android apps also have different stacks for backend? Uh, no, we different stacks. For backend. So, to be honest, with Android apps, what I do know is as long as there's an API, there's an endpoint, you have your JSON, the DTOs are there, you have your KTOR client or retrofit, it just works. Android apps don't have front end. They're like mini browsers. Okay, Dennis. I hear you. We have 10 minutes, guys. Yes, there's somebody who's raised their hand. Kindly speak, Glenn, and then Samuel. And I'm giving you 2 minutes each because time is about to end. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I wanted to ask something about offline apps, which let's say when you want to store data using a
Mhm.
room or something, so
Yeah.
that they can support an
Mhm.
an offline experience. Just asking about how to synchronize the data so
Uh,
that when the user gets internet, they get the latest data, and when user makes changes while offline, the changes are updated to the backend.
okay, I get what you're saying. There's the aspect of interception, right? And then when it comes to room database, when they add, wait, let me understand. So basically, when the user, when the person is offline, let me see. For example, like WhatsApp, when you send a message, of course, it's not going to send if your internet is not on, right? And then when you put your internet back on, um, all the processes are going to go back. So like it's actually going to work. Is that what you're saying? So you want to know the how or
Yeah, I'm asking something
Mhm.
along those lines. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, of course, it just depends on how you integrate it, as you have said. If already it is saved in room database, then um if already something has been saved on room database, you'd have to now connect room database directly to KTOR client still, and then um, have that connection to your backend. But having an interceptor is very important so that your app can know if it is offline or not. So there's also that aspect of having an interceptor. But yeah, but I'll definitely do more research and give feedback on the same. I think Samuel raised his hand as well.
Oh yeah. So hi.
Yes. Hi.
I'm currently a student at
Okay.
Strathmore.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm done. I'm just awaiting graduation.
Oh,
Yeah,
congratulations.
thank you. So I wanted to like I'm choosing. I did computer science,
Okay.
and I think I want to do mobile development going forward,
Okay.
and Android to be particular. So my question is, should I start from Java? Am I just go to Kotlin straight? And
Mm-hmm.
then how is the market locally and maybe
Mm.
internationally? Yeah.
Okay. You want an honest opinion from me.
Yeah.
But this is my personal opinion. Everyone is, everyone has a right to have their own opinion. Yeah. So, you've already made the decision that you want to go with Android. Very good decision, right? Um, where should you start? I started with Java. Okay. I did Java for like 2 weeks, and I was like, I can't do this. Let me do Kotlin. And I found Kotlin to be easier for me, you see. And where I started doing XML, XML became difficult. And I said, let me try Jetpack Compose. And I did Jetpack Compose and it worked. You see, so it just depends on how fast you want to learn, or like how fast you want to enter the industry, or like how sharp you are. I needed things like really quickly, like when I was moving, because I needed to move fast. So I just decided, okay, so I'm going to go to Kotlin direct. It's good for you to know Java. Look, it's very good for you to know Java. It's important, but for me, I just go directly into Kotlin. Like Kotlin, I just go direct to Jetpack Compose, and as we move. So that's what I would advise. How the market is right now, it is not so good. But what can I say? What I've got to learn about the industry is that it's not really about how good it is. It's really about who you know, honestly. um Referrals are such a big thing. So I would really advise you to make some friends and know the type of friends to make. You see, get to interact with people, um, make friends, make as many friends as you can. It will help you to get a job faster without even applying. It's that good. So yeah. Guys, we have 8 minutes. I know that there's so many discussions going on, Uku, in the comments, because we have web developers. So Dennis, people, we will take this conversation to Twitter, okay? But yes, Samuel.
So this is just a
Mm-hmm.
follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you're going for an interview, like in companies hiring Android engineers,
Okay.
and you tell them you only know Kotlin, and let's say they have some legacy code in Java. Do they have a problem with that? Since it's the current thing, it's just okay for them.
Samuel, this is what I will tell you, right? In this life, even when you don't know something, it just depends on how you sell yourself. I think I've also come to see that even the difference between a senior and a junior is there's some confidence, there's some tech confidence that they have. So that's why I've said, it's even in this talk, I've said that it's good for you to know backend surface level, um UI UX surface level, just get to know what happens. So yeah, it's not that I don't know Java, right? Tell me to write a Java code, I did it for what, like 2 weeks. Like all I'll have to do is just look at the code again, and I'll write it, you see. But it's not that you don't know what goes on. You're not supposed to remain like, I don't know anything. You just know. And you'd never say that you don't know when you go for an interview. You know, it's just that they've not given you the opportunity. You need to have some tech confidence. And I know a number of people agree with me. So yeah. Um Sorry, Dennis. Nice to hear I can resume learning Kotlin and completely ignore Java. Well, no. I did not say you completely ignore Java, but I mean, but if you're applying for a role that they take Java, kindly just know, because Kotlin is just Java made easier. That's all I can say. It's that's all it is. So yeah, but Samuel, maybe you can reach out to me, because we're also looking, for interns for a mastercraft internship, so that you can get to work in a team as you look for a role in the market. Yeah, and you can also get to network with some of our great engineers at Mentorlst. Otherwise, guys, the 5 minutes that I am going to give back to you, I'd just like to say thank you very much. I'll also be giving you guys updates on future talks that we will be having. We will definitely be, I'll be working with some of the engineers at Mentorlst to give talks. So we want to give in-depth, help guys to understand quite a number of things that are ignored by a lot of mobile app developers. With that said, I just like to say thank you and do have a good night. Bye-bye.